Hello everyone, welcome to NeoUnrealist. A couple of days ago on August 30th, 2019 at 1:44 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, President of the United States Donald Trump tweeted an image of a launch site in Iran called Semnon Launch Site 1. The image showed the complete failure of the Safir space launch vehicle that occurred earlier in the week. And the purpose of the launch was presumably to put the Nahid-1 satellite into orbit over the Earth, but obviously space programs, they have significant overlap with strategic missile programs. Now, after all, if you can put a satellite into orbit, then you pretty much have most of what you need to field a functional ICBM. So, as was the case with the United States and the USSR during the 1950s and 1960s, space programs are often used as a cover for researching and testing ICBMs. But in any event, coming back to the present and Trump's tweet, that was essentially him denying speculation that the United States played a role in the launch failure at Semnon. Not to mention that I suspect it's also Trump's way of getting Iran's colossal failure into the news cycle, as it was a little noticed event. His way of trolling the Iranians and making them endure a little humiliation over it. Now, right away, the left-wing media and the blue checkmark Twitterati, they cried out in unison about this being some kind of national security catastrophe. Oh my God, how could Trump do this? Once again, the bad orange man has ruined everything. Yes, we may as well just close up the National Reconnaissance Office.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now?
You know, Private Hudson's assessment aside, Rip Bill Paxton, by the way, somehow I think the outrage rings a bit hollow. First of all, in the larger sense, the fact that the United States of America more or less has most, if not the entire planet, under constant satellite surveillance is not only common knowledge, it's been that way for decades, before most of you watching this were even born. Now, you might recall a little incident in history that happened between the US and the USSR over Cuba back in 1962. The President of the United States at the time, he was a Democrat who you might have heard of him. His name was John F. Kennedy. And President Kennedy, he released multiple blown-up photographs of U.S. satellite imagery of multiple launch facilities in Cuba. The release of those images in 1962, 57 years ago, I think America's geopolitical rivals are well aware that they are under the eyes in the sky run by the National Reconnaissance Office. Pretty much, they even know what time the satellite's overhead even, so that's low-hanging fruit. Only the simpler blue check marks on Twitter were really talking about stuff like that. So it's really not, that's not important. What the alleged sophisticates were selling, the people who should know better, was the concern that by releasing this image, Trump revealed classified data on what the capabilities of U.S. spy satellites are. What a load of crap. Over the years, it's become standard practice for the United States government when it releases satellite images, and believe me, they've released a lot of them, with all our activities going on, around the world, to release lower resolution versions of the full resolution originals that the government has access to. This is in order to keep, the secrets of the capabilities of U.S. satellites, keep that out of the hands of our rivals. Makes sense, right? You'd have to agree with that. Well, maybe it did make sense in the 1960s. Hell, it still made a lot of sense throughout most of the 1990s, even into the early 2000s. But let's take a look at why this looks to be increasingly irrelevant. Early speculation on this image that Trump released was that maybe due to the quality of the image, that it wasn't a satellite at all. Perhaps the image was it's so high resolution that maybe it was taken by some kind of drone. In my opinion, as of this moment right now, it's extremely unlikely. That would mean, for that to be true, that the U.S. would have had to have violated Iranian airspace, and I'm not saying that's totally out of the realm of possibility. I seriously doubt Trump would care too much about that. But for many reasons, it's just not desirable or necessary. For one thing, it gives the Iranians something to complain about. Oh, the American imperialists have invaded our airspace. Number two, for something that sophisticated, a drone that would be doing that, the possibility that it would be shot down and recovered by the Iranians, and they could use that to improve their own capabilities, it's just too high to risk that over some Iranian satellite launch. Besides which, the doubt was removed on the origin of the photo when amateur satellite surveillance experts, after examining the image, they were able to figure out that it was taken by an American reconnaissance satellite known only as USA 224. Now, Dr. Marco Langbroek, a Dutch archaeologist, is that Marco Langbroek or Langbroek? Let's go with Langbroek. He keeps this guy keeps track of objects in space. He's one of a community that does this, and he was able to simulate the view that satellite USA 224 had of the launch site at the moment the image was taken. And as it turns out, his extrapolation is just about a perfect match. To me, that's 99.99% chance that this is exactly what happened. Satellite USA 224, if you know anything about the astronomical odds of this being a coincidence, I mean, forget winning the lottery. This is like winning the lottery multiple times. So let's just assume now that the image is indeed a satellite image taken by an object known to, amateur space watchers as USA 224, which we also know was launched into space in 2011 and cost the U.S. taxpayers roughly $2 billion to build and launch it. Now, as of 2019, one of the best commercially available satellite imagery that you can get comes from companies like Maxar, which also took, by the way, an image of the launch site at the time of the incident. So look at this. Commercial industry, has images of the same incident. Amazing. You don't require an intel agency, but it's believed that Maxar and their competitors can get you resolutions as fine as 30 centimeters per pixel on a satellite image of the surface of the Earth. So that what you're looking at for every pixel in the image is, a foot is roughly 30.5 centimeters. So let's call it in layman's terms, 1 foot per pixel to us Americans on the English system of measurement. So you can see that the Maxar image, on its own, the Maxar image, the commercial satellite company, it's pretty freaking good. But, so compared the currently available Maxar imagery to these grainy black and white images I showed you from 1962 earlier in the video, and you'd have to agree it's insanely better, right? Well, the problem with the outraged lefty arguments is that we are rapidly approaching, even with publicly available satellite imagery, a sort of cap on the resolution that you can expect from satellite images that rely on visible light. Pictures. You see, there's this little thing, you may have heard of it, it's called the Earth's atmosphere, and it occupies the many miles of space between satellites and the surface of the planet. Now, while for everyday purposes, at the distances that we're accustomed to dealing with, say your immediate environment, the air is clear and transparent for the most part, as far as we're concerned. Absent a lot of smoke, dust, blown sand, smog, and the like, for all intents and purposes, it's clear. You can't see it. Well, not exactly. You've seen how on a hot day, objects in the distance can appear to be hazy, they can shimmer or whatever. You see how fog can limit visibility, and not to mention clouds. Well, if you're a pilot, there are certain days if you don't have an instrument flight rating for most airspaces, you can't fly if visibility drops below 3 miles. But at the scale of the altitude of a satellite, most of them are flying up around 200 kilometers up. Even the clearest day doesn't make much of a difference because, between sea level and 20,000 feet up is that there's a lot of a phenomenon called atmospheric turbulence. And to put it simply, the air, it just moves a lot. In any event, because of that and the diffraction of light as it moves through the atmosphere, what start off as tightly focused beams of light, they tend to spread. In other words, the images get blurry. So look into the Rayleigh criterion, look into angular resolution if you want to know in more detail, because with this topic I could go on for hours, we'd lose the point of the video, and I'm probably not the best person to convey that kind of information to you. It's highly technical, but the best estimate is that with even bleeding edge tech, around 10 centimeters per pixel resolution on satellite images, due to the atmospheric effects and the scattering properties of light that I mentioned. It's pretty much as low as things can go, with the way we currently do things as far as visible light imagery is concerned. Now, I did some digging around. This is me in my freaking bedroom on a Sunday morning utilizing just open source information available on the internet. Now, since I know that USA 224 was launched in 2011 at a cost of $2 billion, I looked up the latest generations of US keyhole satellites known to be in use. Sure enough, I found KH-11, actual code name Evolved Enhanced Crystal, or EECS. The KH-11 Block 4 generation has had 3 known launches, starting October 2005, January 2011, which is I believe the one that we're dealing with USA 224, and the last Block 4 launch was in August 2013. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that the object known as USA 224, like I mentioned, is in fact the KH-11 Block 4 satellite launched in January of 2011. In which case, it was already known that it had a 2,400 millimeter aperture lens. It's known that it has a 256 by 1,006 kilometer orbit, and the upper limit of 700 nanometers for the wavelength of visible light. That happens to be the wavelength of red light, in case you didn't know, from 630 to 700 nanometers. But yeah, you put all that together, a 2,400 millimeter aperture, an orbit of 256 by 1,006 kilometers, and the wavelength of visible light being up to 700 nanometers, you get a limit of 9 centimeters resolution for the KH-11 Block 4 satellites. Wow! What do you know? Just inside the practical limit that I cited just before, where things start to get blurry for satellite imagery at roughly 10 centimeters. You think that's a coincidence? So the fact that commercial satellite imagery can already provide images down to 30 centimeters resolution, while as some estimate from the image that Trump shared, it looks like that satellite image is at a 10 centimeter resolution, for crying out loud. Not only does Iran already know this information, I found that information on freaking Quora and Wikipedia. Not to mention that these people are utter morons, because again, if you check the freaking internet, you would learn that on January 19th, 2019, earlier this year, a KH-11 Block 5 satellite, Block 5, not Block 4, is believed to have been launched, but with an unusual for the KH series satellites, a 74-degree orbital inclination. Not to mention that the next launch of the latest KH-11 Block 5 satellite is already scheduled to be in 2020, rapidly approaching. Now, if one assumes that the Block 5 satellite that's already in orbit starting this year, this is a current year technology, is a generation better than the KH-11 Block 4 satellites, which were first appeared over a decade ago in 2005. It's 14 years now. And we presume that this image of the failed space launch, for crying out loud, it doesn't even represent the best satellite imagery available to the United States government anymore. I mean, come on. So the leftist leaders, the concern trollers, the shriekers that Trump revealed a capability for U.S. spy satellites that's listed, it's listed for everyone to see on the internet, for God's sakes. And that it's 14 years and a full generation behind the latest U.S. spy satellite launched. And all that, even as commercial satellites are already approaching the point where the 10 centimeter atmospheric bottleneck is already closing the gap between the public and the intel sector's imagery. Oh my God, we're doomed. That's all for this NeoUnrealist. If you want to help the channel out, hit like for this video, leave a comment below, and hit the subscribe button if you're not subbed already. Click on the notification bell next to it and set it to all, or it just won't make a difference. YouTube, they've made the subscribe button on its own meaningless. So you got to set that notification bell to all if you want to keep up with new content. If you want to support the channel directly, toss your hard-earned dollars and your reals into the tip jar. You follow below the links to Subscribestar, PayPal. If you watch this on Bitch, you just click on the green tip pledge button on the video player. By now, if you're still hearing this, though, you've sat through the e-begging and the long discourse on U.S. satellite tech and the details of atmospheric turbulence and the practical implications of the wave-like properties of light on satellite imagery. You've certainly earned another hash mark towards getting that die-hard achievement. Thanks for watching.
How do I get out of this chicken shit outfit?